Hey there everyone, it's Scott once again and welcome to another video. This time we're going to be talking about the very final entry in the Rambo franchise, Rambo Last Blood, and here's the theater ticket that I have from Cinemark. Saw it on the 1st of October because, you know, Tuesdays it's $5 or technically $5.95. And apparently recently Cinemark must have changed their policy because apparently you now have to sign up, you know, like give them your email and stuff like that in order to be part of the the $5.95 discount. So yeah, you now have to sign up for that, which is bullshit if you ask me. So I don't know if I'm going to fully complete it, because if I didn't, you know, give them the email and all that other stuff, it would have been almost $12. Technically $11.91, but might as well be $12 at night. I don't know what it is during the day. It's probably like either like 10 something, maybe 9 something. I don't care. Things are definitely rapidly changing in the theater structure, so yeah. But anywho, while I don't completely hate this film, this is definitely the weakest film. I mainly have some problems with the supporting characters. That's what I have a problem with. You know, there's not a whole lot of action, and the flaws will definitely come back to me at some point. It's not going to be a raging rant, but nevertheless, it's going to be some ranting and some problems I have with this film that makes me wish that, you know what, Stallone shouldn't have done this film. It should have stayed at the fourth one. But anywho, I'll get to the crew and the cast. Stallone isn't bad in the film because, in fact, he writes the film. He even wrote the story. But I feel like there's not a whole lot of action. That's mainly the main problem. But I'll get to that. He doesn't direct the film this time. It's directed by a guy by the name of Adrian Grunberg. He had served as like an assistant director on like a few other films like Edge of Darkness and some other films. The only other directing credit that he has was, I believe, Get the Gringo, which I do have. It had Mel Gibson. It was a fairly decent film, but I don't think it had much action. And sadly, this film doesn't have much action until like the last 10-15 minutes. But anywho, yep, the producers, Ivy Lerner comes back. You have, I guess, his son, or at least a relative of his, Yarev Lerner, and you also have Kevin Keane Templeton return as well, apparently, and Les Weldon's one of the producers. Stallone, like I said, writes the screenplay. He even wrote the story. The screenplay was co-written by a guy by the name of Matthew Serlonek, or whatever you fucking pronounce his name. And the story was also done by Dan Gordon, sorry, not Don. But in addition to Stallone, you have new cast members with Paz Vega as one of the journalists. And she's not in the film a whole lot. She's only in there for maybe like 5 minutes. And you have Sergio Peris-Mencheta as Hugo Martinez, one of the drug lords. He's basically our main villain. You have Adriana Barraza as Maria Beltran, who's basically a friend and kind of helps out Rambo on the ranch. And Yvette Monreal as Gabriella, Maria's granddaughter, and, you know, calls Rambo Uncle John, despite the fact they're not being related. You also have Joaquín Cosío as Don Manuel, Oscar Jaenada as Victor Martinez. He's another villain in there. You have Vanessa Pineda as Giselle, kind of Gabriella's shady and untrustworthy friend. And that's basically your cast right there. And the film score was done by Brian Tyler once again. Felt like Brian Tyler kind of took a step back. He did a good job on the fourth one. I forgot to also say that the end theme for that film, it was great. The ending title theme whenever Rambo comes home, it was very well done. It was a great way for him to end the film, and almost a great, you know, spirit of Jerry Goldsmith's score. Here's a few themes that are okay, but I feel like the score here was not quite as memorable, and it seemed like he kind of, repeated his tracks from this previous entry. So then you have a couple of editors and Toddy Miller and Karsten Kerpenek. The cinematography was done by a guy by the name of Brandon Galvin. The film, of course, was distributed by Lionsgate, of course. And apparently we got a shorter version because there was a flood in the beginning, but apparently I think the international countries got that. We didn't. Supposedly, however, Rambo Ralph for Life somehow managed to see that flood scene, and I heard it wasn't that good. Apparently it was the visual effects looked like they were like too CGI'd, and this movie had a $50 million budget, and it didn't look. And according to him, it looked like a straight-to-video flick. So I didn't see that scene. Maybe we'll get it whenever the Blu-ray comes out. So there you go. Anywho, I'll talk about the plot. Hopefully, I won't elaborate on that too much. So basically, a good deal of time has passed after the events in Burma. John Rambo's at this ranch, trying to maintain it. It's his deceased father's horse ranch, and I'm guessing his father had died somewhere between the time of Rambo and this film, which I wish they wouldn't have done. And basically, he also has some help with an old friend, which is Maria Beltran, which is Barraza's character. Barraza's character. And then her granddaughter, Gabriela, which is, she calls him Uncle John. They have a good, relationship, a father-daughter-like relationship, even though she's really trying to find her real father. Well, eventually she gets news of that from kind of a shady friend of hers by the name of Giselle, who is now apparently has found her biological father in Mexico. And despite wanting to go down there, Rambo and both Maria warn her that don't go down there. He has not changed a bit. He even says that he knows how a man can have a black heart and stuff like that. But despite all that, Gabriela ignores their wishes and decides to proceed down to Mexico. And eventually she meets up with Giselle, and she leads him to her father, which, by the way, his name is Miguel. They have a talk, face to face in their apartment complex. He basically reveals that he wanted nothing to do with her and didn't really give a shit about either one of them since he left them long ago. And she's basically heartbroken. The fact that he's an asshole and a despicable person. So eventually Giselle takes her to this club where Gabrielle is eventually drugged by this Mexican cartel, and she's taken by them. And then Maria gets wind that Gabriela has disappeared in Mexico, and Rambo travels down there to try to find her. He interrogates both Miguel and Giselle for whereabouts. Giselle reluctantly leads Rambo into the club where Gabriela was last seen. He eventually is able to track down this guy by the name of El Flaco, the man that last spoke with Gabriela. And apparently he's being observed by this mysterious woman, which is Paz Vega's character, Carmen Delgado. She tells him. El Flaco leads him to Gabriela's location. Rambo is immediately confronted and beaten by this gang, which you basically saw in the trailer, by both the Hugo and Victor Martinez, who are basically the leaders of the cartel. They take his driver's license, which reveals his location and his identity, and of course the photo of Gabriela, which Victor recognizes, and basically he tells, Victor actually spares him and tells him they're going to mistreat Gabriela even further now, due to Rambo's actions. They shoot her up, they shoot her up with drugs, they actually they scar her up by marking an X on her, and they even kind of do the same thing to Rambo, they actually scratch an X. And eventually Carmen, who's later revealed to be a journalist, takes Rambo back to her home. She cares for him until he fully recovers. And apparently she's been investigating the Martinez brothers. They were the kidnappers and murderers of her sister. And Rambo eventually later raids one of the brothels. He actually kills several men with a hammer, which is actually one of the well-done scenes, until he finds the drugged Gabriela, who's been just looking horrendous because of all the drugs that have been shot up and being sexually used up and stuff like that. And on the way back home, Rambo even thanks Gabriela for all the years that he's given him hope, but unfortunately she ends up dying of the forced overdose. And, Rambo is heartbroken, and he kind of later becomes enraged, where he vows to wreak vengeance on them. Eventually he sends Maria away and rigs the ranch with some traps for a later confrontation. He actually eventually returns to Mexico back to Carmen's place, where he needs help trying to track down Victor and possibly Hugo. But and Carmen doesn't really give him that information at first, but she eventually reluctantly gives it to him after learning that after Rambo appeals to her grief and her frustrations of not capturing and punishing these bastards, pretty much. So yeah, so eventually Rambo raids Victor's home, killing all the guards, and you find out that he actually decapitated Victor when Hugo eventually finds out, and then he actually drops the head somewhere on a random road. Rambo drops the head of Victor on the road, and then eventually, in retaliation, Hugo leads a group of hitmen, and apparently he must have been some kind of combat experience as well. They go to his ranch where pretty much each victim falls victim to his traps, and the fact that you also see that somehow Rambo became a tunnel rat and was able to dig all these tunnels. I don't think he did it himself. He must have had some help or something. And eventually, all pretty much Victor's... Was it Victor? No, I think it was... Hugo's men pretty much, fall death to his traps in some pretty extreme and graphic violent deaths that you'll see in the last 10-15 minutes. And then eventually, he's able to somehow corner Hugo into the barn where Rambo shoots like several arrows into the guy, where Rambo just mutilates him and rips his heart out. And then, considering that Rambo was kind of wounded, he's able to sit on the porch of his father's house, vowing to continue to fight and keep the memories of the loved ones alive. And basically, during the credits, you see that he saddles up and rides off to the sunset, and that's pretty much your ending. Okay. For the action sequences that were there, they were really good. But unfortunately, the main problems I have with this film is that not a whole lot goes on. There's not really any action within the first hour. I mean, Stallone's performance is fine, but he really doesn't do a whole lot. Maybe I can understand, considering that he's in his 70s, but still, you should at least have one action sequence in there in the first hour, and that's the main problem I have. He doesn't do a whole lot. Not only that, the character of Gabriella, even though, it sucks that whatever happened to her, but her stupid decision is what gets her killed. Like Aunt Rambo's telling her, I know how black-hearted a man can be, don't go there, because he abandoned you, and Gabriella's out, he can change and all this stuff. I mean, he hasn't contacted you in a fucking long time. And that's a really, I can understand him from a teen perspective, but come on, he has never contacted you at any point in your life. What makes you think he's gonna fucking change? And of course, she ignores him. She goes down to her shady and sketchy friend Giselle, and she's even saying, making these really messed up jokes like, I can see you, I can feel you looking at me, and I can feel you looking around this place. I'm sorry, but those are signs that you should fucking get the fuck out and just never come back, because something's not good's not going to happen. And then of course you find out that her father is a complete despicable asshole and never gave a shit about her or her mother, and the fact that he's not even willing to try to connect or make things right between them. So that was kind of pointless, and unfortunately she ends up paying for the actions because her sketchy friend decides to sell her off and stuff like that. And honestly, even though the villains, they're not badly acted, they just really, I don't think they're intimidating at all. I mean, well, I take it back. They may have one intimidation aspect to them, but I just felt like they really were not that great. I mean, I think you could have stepped it up a bit more, like with the Cartel. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're the worst villains in cinema history, but I feel like they just don't do it for me for some reason. I mean, I know they can be pretty vicious people, but you can see, if they were doing something like making them do more than just being whores, like if they were trying to use them for like bait or something, or do something more with the villains, like they can use them, like use the girls more for just sex, but also use them for other additional purposes other than just mistreatment. They really don't do a whole lot. That's the main problem. At least with Victor, although he gets a pretty cool death scene when Rambo drops his head off in the middle of somewhere on the road. So yeah. But yeah, that's the main problem I have. The villains weren't there. I mean, her bad decision is what gets her killed, and while it sucks that she died, how am I supposed to sympathize with that character? Why am I supposed to give a shit about this character? I mean, Rambo and her grandmother tried to warn her, and she refused to fucking listen. She chose to be stupid, and she made this poor decision, which would get her killed, even considering the fact that she had aspirations to go to college. That one mistake is what cost her her life, pretty much. And I really don't have much sympathy for that character. And there's another character that helps out Rambo, and she's really not in the film for a whole lot. She's in there for maybe 5 minutes tops, and I have to agree with her. She's not, a bad character, but there's really nothing to her. She just, I basically healed you up and gave you some information, and that's pretty much it. Because the last time you see her is whenever Rambo's trying to convince her to give her, the location of their hideout and whatnot, or their base of operations, so to speak. And that's pretty much it. And I don't think you see Maria after Rambo sends her away, so you don't see her after that. And like I said, the really good parts is Stallone's performance, especially when he confronts Giselle, when he sees the necklace that Gabriella had, and he was like, "You stole that necklace," and she's like, "She gave it to me," and he's calling her bullshit when he's interrogating her. He has one of the decent scenes where he has a knife and just stabs it on the table just to show that that you don't want to lie to this guy, you don't want to mess with him. So Stallone does fine in that part. His acting's not the problem, it's just that he doesn't do a whole lot. He gets his ass kicked around for a while, and he's not able to save her, so that's kind of a downbeat type of aspect to the film. And, gosh, what else? And even though I like the last bit of the action, it's kind of obvious that there's some CGI blood. I mean, there's some nice little graphic scenes whenever Rambo just shoots at the mercenaries and he blows off their heads and stuff like that. Like, there's so many intense moments where he's able to, even when the guy is like in the traps and he's still alive, he just puts them out of their misery and stuff like that. And then the biggest one, which I thought was probably the coolest part, is whenever he is able to shoot several of those arrows into Hugo, and right before any of that happens, whenever those traps pretty much kill all of Hugo's men, he actually contacts him via radio. He's like, "Now you know how it feels, and I'm gonna rip your heart out." So I thought that scene was well acted. So like I said before, Stallone was really not the problem. His acting was good, but he doesn't do a whole lot. And the one cool scene is whenever he, after he shoots the arrows, he's able to just use his machete and just open up Victor, and he grabs his heart, rips it out, and throws it down, which I thought was cool. But after that, that's pretty much how the film ends, and it's just that I felt like he could have done a little bit more. Like, you could have a little bit more action in the first hour. And the problem is I don't really care about the supporting characters. They don't really do much. They just only appear in it for a little bit, and that's it. Some people will say, why would the people in the people from the missionary church will go to help them? At least they were trying to be selfless and help them. It was just, the stupid decision by Gabriella that, maybe not really sympathize with their character, and she basically, paid the price in the end. So I didn't really give a shit about her character for the most part, even though she was nice looking and, just an innocent victim, but still, her stupid actions is what got her killed, and the fact that within the first hour, Rambo doesn't really do much, except try to track her down, and I felt like it wasn't really much of a Rambo film. It felt more like it could have been a Taken film, or basically like a highly budgeted version of, how should I put this? I'm thinking Lawmire, but, Rambo's not a law official, so I feel like it wasn't, like I said, really much of a Rambo film, and it doesn't really do... Just that basic... I'm just going to sum this up. Rambo doesn't do a whole lot of film. The acting's not the problem. There's not very much action until the last 10 minutes, and that's really the best part of the film. And the heart rip out was done very well. At least it was practical, or looked practical, but But I kind of wish they would have done some of the, I don't know. Oh yeah, and Brian Tyler's score, I felt like he was kind of phoning it in. He basically seemed like he reused certain things from his previous score. His score was not memorable and just didn't have the same impact like it had in the very ending or in the very beginning, where you hear the themes of, a long road type of theme. So yeah, the score wasn't as memorable. Supporting characters don't really do much. The villains weren't as memorable. People were saying that the villains in the third film weren't that great, but at least you saw how they were beating the shit out of Troutman, and it made you hate the villains more, pretty much. Here, they just give Gabrielle a scar, just shoot her up, and that's pretty much it. They don't really do much with the villains. If they had done something more with them, maybe they could have been, just as bad as the previous villains in the fourth Rambo film. At least you hated those villains because they were cruel, savage, inhumane. They threw children into fires. They would kill them. They would try to drag them out for their army. They would either rape and kill women, pretty much, use them as sex slaves, and degrade them in every chance that you can possibly do. Here, it's your typical cartel thing. And I wish people would stop saying that, it's portraying the cartel as racist. It does a good job of portraying the cartel as what they would normally do, but they really don't do a whole lot other than just, abuse and overdose the ladies that are being used for sex, pretty much. So, yeah. So I felt like you should have gotten a clear-cut villain. I swear that Hugo guy kind of reminded me of like an older version of Kit Harington. I swear it's like he based his look off of Jon Snow, so yeah. But overall, I don't hate the film. It's just a very underwhelming way to end the series, and I think the fourth film ended it perfectly. He came full circle, and I felt like at times this movie, I wouldn't say necessarily a straight-to-video film, but I felt like the budget wasn't used quite effectively. I know if I saw that flood scene, I heard it wasn't very good because of the CGI flooding, and it's obvious that it wasn't, real water or done in camera. It's all CGI, so maybe it's a good thing they left that out, otherwise it might have dragged the film down. It's just the film also, now looking back, kind of had a slow pace, and like I said before, it didn't really feel like a Rambo film. It lacked good action in it. And it's definitely the weakest film of the franchise. So, and now I hear Stallone wants to do another one. I honestly say, nope, you shouldn't do another film like this anymore. Just leave your well-known franchise alone and just stick to doing maybe serious performances. If you cannot do the action bits anymore, just stick with that, Stallone. Just leave your fucking well-known franchise away. And if you want to do a Cobra 2, you should have done that some time ago. So I wouldn't say don't retire yet, Stallone, but don't do any films like this again. I think you should just leave them alone. I think you milked them enough for what they were at. So, anywho, that's going to do it for me. And to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to do another video anymore because I'm doing this on my phone and it uses up a lot of battery power and disk space. So my channel might be on a bit of a delay after this. I don't know for how long until I get a new computer, if it has a fairly decent webcam. So yeah. So anyways, I hope you like this review. Hopefully you give it a thumbs up. And whenever I do come back, I'll keep grinding out more content to the best of my ability. And hopefully you'll like it. So anywho, there's my review and rant for Rambo Last Blood. So unfortunately a very underwhelming end to the franchise. Don't hate it, but it just could have been done much better. And looking back, they should have brought in the father element. They should have brought in a much better villain. I would have at least tried to bring Dennehy's character back to make amends for what he did to Rambo in the first film. And they end up helping each other. They make peace with what happened between them. That would have been, a very good way to come even more full circle now that I think about it. They should have done it that way. Sorry I forgot to mention that, but that's what I should have said earlier. But anyways. Anywho, I'm going to end it right here. Hopefully you like this video. Give it a thumbs up. And whenever I come back, I'll grind up more content for your liking. So I will see you later, folks. Later.